So that's always an inspiration. When you're doing a job interview, it's like coming in, the awkwardness, like, hire me, but I don't want to be too desperate, but I don't want to be too cold. And it's like a very self-conscious thing, isn't it? Kind of like this interview now, maybe. I'm just like, well, who am I right now? How am I coming across? Hi, I'm Riz Ahmed, and these are my absolute scenes for Enemy.
Bobby, what you doing, man? What you doing running off like that?
I got scared.
That's not a goddamn excuse, okay?
These are two amazing young actors, really. Aditya Gadado plays Bobby, Lucian River Chauhan, who plays Jay. They kind of were taking me to school every day. You know, when you work with young actors, they bring such honesty and authenticity to everything. It kind of keeps you honest. And the cool thing about Aditya, who plays Bobby in the scene, is that he didn't care what the script was. He just did his own thing, you know. He would just riff, he would just make things up, so it kept everything fresh. And also, like I said about honesty, if you weren't really scaring him, he wasn't gonna act scared, you know. If you were boring, he would yawn in your face. So there was something really cool about working with these guys. And yeah, it was like a learning experience for me, honestly. So throughout Sound of Metal, we used varying different techniques to simulate the deafness or the hearing loss. And in this sequence, I'm actually wearing these audio blockers deep inside my ear canal. We took hearing aids and repurposed them to emit a white noise to the point where you can't even hear the sound of your own voice. And at this point, when his hearing loss is quite sudden and acute, you know, that was what we were going for, that effect of really total disorientation. Yeah, it was quite a visceral, intense experience actually, because Darius Marder, the writer-director, would control the level of white noise. So I wouldn't have any control over it. I'd be doing a scene, I'd be talking to someone, that all of a sudden it would kick in. And so that sense of, hang on a minute, what's going on, where am I, is something spontaneous that you're capturing on screen. Yeah, this was just like amazing working with Olivia Cook, I would say. She's someone who just lets you try things, makes you feel safe, will follow you wherever you go, will lead you in the most kind of authentic, unforced way as well. And it was really looking at her and her kind of soothing, calming presence meant we arrived at the scene the way it is. Yeah. You know, in my head, I always thought that this would be quite an explosive scene, and there'd be a bit of an outcry about him suddenly admitting that he can't hear. But actually looking at Olivia, looking at her, the kind of love in her eyes in that moment, I think Ruben is able to just exhale the truth of that moment.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
Are you Richard?
Rick.
I'm Louis Boom.
Oh, hey, Lou.
Louis, sit down. The situation is that I lost an employee, and I'm interviewing for a replacement.
Okay, the ad didn't say what the job was?
It's a fine opportunity for some lucky someone.
Man, I've had some bad auditions. So that's always an inspiration. When you're doing a job interview, it's like coming in, the awkwardness, like, hire me, but I don't want to be too desperate, but I don't want to be too cold. And it's like a very self-conscious thing, isn't it? Kind of like this interview now, maybe. I'm just like, well, who am I right now? How am I coming across? Yeah, so there's like, so there's always that to draw on. But to be honest, Jake Gyllenhaal was such a weirdo in the best way shooting this film. And remember, he was starving himself to achieve the effect of this just bottomless hunger that the character had. And I was just watching him transform before my eyes. So it was just unsettling being around him. You know, I think the scenes that people remember, or the scenes that people kind of say, hey, you know, that was great, it's basically because you're playing opposite someone who's doing so much of the work for you, and you can just react to them. And that was the case certainly in this scene. You know, people kind of mentioned this scene and I'm just like, dude, I was just there while this weirdo was doing his thing. And I was just reacting like you are, you know. And it's also just beautiful writing. So much of the writing kind of does the work for you. But yeah, I remember watching this scene back going, yeah, that looks as weird as it felt to film it, which is good.
It was a martyr's death.
Con Paradise in it for the Roma.
He disrupted the infrastructure.
How did he do that?
Oh, he took out a sheep. Magnificently, took it right out.
Did he?
He attacked the food supply.
Some of it's in there with him.
What?
I couldn't separate it.
So what is he, lads? Is he a martyr or is he a fucking jalfrezi?
I cannot tell you how much of Four Lions film footage is just us cracking up on camera. Like, they need to do an outtakes. There needs to be a DVD extra special, like 15-year anniversary edition that's just all the footage of us cracking up. Yeah, I mean, it's because of the script, man. You got Jesse Armstrong, you know, the genius behind Peep Show and Succession, and you got Chris Morris in there. And what's interesting about this whole sequence is we shot, obviously, the Fessel blowing himself up by mistake scene. And we weren't meant to do that next sequence where I come in and start shouting at everyone and there's all these really long speeches, this really dramatic scene. We weren't meant to do that for another week. And then on the day, as it sometimes is with kind of low budget filmmaking, we went, right, things have moved around. We might lose next week's location. We have to do that scene now. You just get ready in 2 minutes. And it was like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? And actually, sometimes that can really help. You don't have a chance to overthink it. You're just literally looking at the dialogue, trying to remember it, and just shooting from the hip. And so what you actually had is something quite frenetic because we're all like, can we get this scene right? Can we do it? And it ends up infusing the scene with that kind of intense energy. I remember thinking one of the things I was most nervous about was all the Urdu swearing. You know, I speak Urdu at home sometimes, you know, my family, but not that kind of Urdu. You know, I'm not used to like swearing my head off in that language. But yeah, again, something about the panic of like, why is Chris asking us to do this huge scene at last minute? Just meant the adrenaline kind of carried us through. It's got some of my favorite lines in it, man. You know, jump off the tree and blow up the internet arse first. And yeah, like, is he a martyr or a jalfrezi? It's just got killer line after killer line. But at the time, you're just trying to get through the scene. And you watch it back and you go like, how did we keep a straight face? And you remember, oh yeah, we didn't for 9 takes out of 10. It was really interesting. It was a new experience for me because you do the voice for the character, but then they kind of animated it also. It is kind of like doing an animation. You know, this whole kind of sequence of Riot suddenly smashing up the control room and he decides to just go full-blown nutter, basically. It's a lot of fun. I gotta be honest, you know, just to kind of unleash that kind of aggression. But they don't let you do all of the fight sequences, you know. They map that in an animation. So to be honest, it's kind of interesting with a process like this. You're almost like one of the fans. You know, I'm waiting to see what they've animated. You know, they give you a rough idea of what the fight sequence is going to be like. They show you pictures and stuff. But when you go in to voice the character, you're doing it after they've done the animation. So it's exciting, you know. In a way, it kind of takes the pressure off. You don't have to do all that crazy, you know, acrobatic fight stuff. I've known Tom for a long time, and I imagine that a lot of casting decisions he'd sign off on. So shout out Tom. But I've known him for a really long time, and I remember, you know, he did a cameo for my music video for Sour Times back in 2007. I remember meeting him around that same time, and he's telling me he's always been a bit of a closet rapper as well. He's loved hip hop always, and he's always been very supportive of my music and reached out and stuff to say, you know, when he's liking what I'm putting out. He's just a lovely dude, you know. Obviously, he's got that crazy intensity and aggression and physicality when he needs to turn it on. But most of the time, he's just like He's just a teddy bear. He's just the sweetest guy.
The question seems simple, but the answer's kind of long. I could tell them Wembley, but I don't think that's what they want, and I don't want to tell them more, because anything I say is wrong.
Yeah, so the idea for this whole project came up when I met Anil Karia, Jan Demonge, who created Top Boy, put me in touch with Anil, who was also working on Top Boy, and I'd loved some of the work he'd done with Kano on the Class of Deja video. So we met up and I told him I'm making this album about, you know, breaking up with Britain or feeling like Britain is breaking up with you. And I played him some of the music and I said, look, I just want to create a short film that touches on, the, you know, some of these different tracks. So we always knew there were going to be these different tracks in the film. We always knew that we would end on that spoken word piece that's actually on the album called Where You From. That decision to shift from something that feels very realistic and grounded and everyday to suddenly shifting to something that feels very intense and almost like a thriller and an action movie, to finally going into this kind of surreal poetry, theatrical thing, that's a very hard thing to do. And that's all down to Anil. You know, as a director, he's someone that can seamlessly move between these different flavors in the same film, and the audience goes with it. And the reason why he can do that is because he always keeps it honest. Again, it was another case of not having a lot of time to do it. This was on the shortest day of the year in terms of daylight. And I remember when we shot that final bit, we had 2 takes. We were going to do it in 1 take. So we shot the first take and it was like, I was stood in the wrong position. You know, like the light wasn't on me. I was like, okay, so we've basically got 1 take. And sometimes that can really focus you. You know, when you know you've only got 1 crack at it, you kind of like are at the mercy of circumstance. So in a way, you kind of have to surrender to it. When you surrender, then you get into a flow and then things just start happening. And it ended up being, you know, a solid take that we could use. That's not an argument for always working under crazily difficult conditions, but sometimes having those restrictions, having that pressure can really focus everyone.